One morning, a girl in high heels stumbled out of her house in a panic, her clothes in disarray. She ran for her life, glancing frantically over her shoulder as though something horrifying were chasing her. But strangely, the street behind her was completely empty, not a soul in sight. After circling the block in a frenzy, she rushed back inside, grabbed her car keys, and sped off toward the ocean. As night fell, she sat alone on the beach and called her father. Through tears, she left what sounded like a goodbye. The next morning, her body was found. It had been twisted into an impossible shape, left exposed in the open air. No perpetrator, no signs of a struggle. This was no ordinary death. Jay lived in an ordinary house in the suburbs. She had a close younger sister named Kelly, and a tight-knit group of childhood friends. At 19, her biggest worry was which outfit to wear on a date. She was happily lost in the haze of new romance, completely unaware that a nightmare was already closing in. Her new boyfriend's name was Hugh. He seemed a little skittish, but he was gentle and considerate. One evening, the two of them went to the movies. Everything seemed normal, until intermission, when Hugh suddenly grabbed her arm and pointed toward the entrance, his face taut with anxiety. "Do you see that girl in the yellow dress?" Jay looked. There was no one there. The color drained from Hugh's face. Without a word, he seized her hand and pulled her out of the theater. Jay was thoroughly confused. He offered a vague excuse, and she let it go, chalking it up to an upset stomach or some kind of anxiety. A few days later, their relationship deepened. Under the swaying shadows of trees at the edge of town, in the backseat of Hugh's car, Jay crossed a threshold she thought marked something meaningful, a milestone of youth, of intimacy. She had no idea it was actually a handoff of something far darker. While she was still lost in the afterglow, Hugh moved without warning. From behind, he pressed something over her mouth and nose. A sharp, acrid smell flooded her senses. The world went dark. When Jay came to, she was strapped to a wheelchair in an abandoned, half-finished building. Panic overtook her completely. But Hugh didn't hurt her. Instead, he looked at her with something like guilt and began explaining the rules of this absurd and terrifying game. He told her that when they were together, he had passed something to her, a curse. Once infected, a figure would begin following you. It could take the form of anyone, a stranger, a friend, even a family member. Only the cursed person could see it. And it had one purpose, to reach you, and kill you. It moved slowly. It never ran, but it always knew exactly where you were, and it never stopped. The only escape was to pass the curse on, to sleep with someone else and transfer it to them. Jay stared at him, speechless. She thought he was insane. She screamed at him to take her home. And then, in the distance, a naked woman appeared, moving toward them with a stiff, mechanical gait, one step at a time. The sight of it made Hugh's story horrifyingly real. Jay's mind nearly shattered. Hugh frantically wheeled her back to the car and drove her home, leaving her on the sidewalk in front of her house before disappearing into the night. Everyone assumed Jay had been abducted or assaulted, her trauma making her incoherent. Police got involved. They found that Hugh was a fake name. The apartment he'd rented had been vacated. The naked woman no one else had seen, she could have been a hallucination, as far as anyone was concerned. No one believed the story Hugh had told her. But nightmares don't stop just because no one believes in them. Back in school, still unable to shake the shadow hanging over her, Jay was sitting half listening in class when something caught the corner of her eye. Outside on the lawn, an old woman in a nightgown was walking slowly toward the building from the far end of the campus. Her pace was deliberate and unhurried, but her direction was unmistakable. Her clouded, vacant eyes were fixed on Jay through the classroom window. One step, two steps, closer. Jay's breathing quickened. She snatched her bag and bolted from the room. But by the time she was in the hallway, the figure was almost behind her. Jay spun around. "Hey!" No response. The classmates nearby exchanged baffled looks. They saw nothing. In that moment, the truth settled over Jay like cold water. Everything Hugh had said was real. She went straight to the diner where her sister Kelly worked and told her everything. Kelly, and Paul, who had quietly loved Jay since childhood. They were skeptical, but the collapse in Jay's eyes was unmistakable. They agreed to spend the night at her place. Late that night, Jay lay awake and gave up on sleep. She padded to the living room and sat beside Paul. They talked quietly, about childhood, about the first time they'd slept over at each other's houses. For a few minutes, the room felt almost soft. Then a sharp crash shattered the stillness. Glass, from the kitchen. Paul went to check. The kitchen window was broken. No sign of how. Doors and windows were locked. Nothing had been disturbed. Still, they called the police to be safe. While Paul went upstairs to wake Kelly, Jay waited, and her curiosity got the better of her. She crept toward the kitchen. She turned, and saw something that nearly stopped her heart. A woman with tangled hair and disheveled clothes was walking slowly toward her, eyes vacant, expression frozen. And as the woman moved, something wet dripped from her chin, beyond her control. Jay screamed. She sprinted upstairs on all fours, threw herself into her room, and deadbolted the door. She pressed herself into the corner, shaking. Kelly and Paul came running. Jay finally exhaled. Trembling, she unlocked the door to let them in. Then another knock, urgent, rapid. Paul grabbed a mop and approached the door cautiously. But the voice on the other side was familiar. It was their friend Yara. Everyone's nerves unwound. Kelly pulled the door open. The next second, everything changed. Something unbearable rushed into the room. Jay couldn't even bring herself to look at it. She screamed and flung herself off the balcony, grabbed a bicycle from the yard, and pedaled into the night like she was running from the end of the world. She didn't stop until she reached the empty park. She braked hard and sat on a swing, eyes wild, scanning the darkness in every direction. The others found her there, breathless. None of them knew exactly what she had seen, but the broken window was real. Her terror was real. Whatever was following her was real. Their neighbor Greg had witnessed Jay's breakdown and offered to help. Once Jay had steadied herself, she realized something. To understand any of this, she needed to find Hugh, the person who had passed the curse to her. The real Hugh, whoever that was. Everyone agreed. They drove through the night to his old rental house. The place was a ruin, but the evidence of what he'd lived through was everywhere. Improvised alarm systems made of glass bottles and pull tabs strung across the doors and windows, an escape hatch hidden in a wardrobe. He had been fighting a long, desperate war of evasion from inside these walls. Digging through the wreckage, Paul found an old photograph among a stack of adult magazines. In it, Hugh stood with a girl, both wearing high school uniforms. Jay recognized them immediately. They traced the school, found the yearbook, and matched the face to a name, Jeff. The address on file was a town not far away. They drove there that night. Jay knocked. A woman answered, Jeff's mother, cheerful and unsuspecting, who invited them all inside. Jeff appeared, looking like a man bracing for something long overdue. He admitted everything, his guilt plain. He told them he'd caught the curse from a stranger he'd met at a bar. He had spent months trying to find a way out, and found nothing. No cure, no loophole. The only way to survive was to pass it on to someone else. And the chain was unbreakable. If Jay were killed, the curse would return to him. It never ended. It just kept moving. To buy themselves more time to think, their neighbor Greg suggested his family's lake cabin, remote enough that the figure would need days to reach them on foot. But even there, the dread didn't lift. To help Jay sleep, Paul kept watch through the night. Greg dug a gun out of the storage shed and taught Jay how to load it, aim it, and fire. During the day, they sat by the lake. It almost felt like a vacation. Almost. Yara was floating on the water some distance out. From the tree lean on the shore, another Yara was slowly walking toward them. No one else saw it, only Jay. Before she could react, something struck her. Everyone scrambled into the shed. Jay raised the gun and fired, and the figure went down. But before anyone could breathe, it simply stood back up, unharmed. Jay slammed the shed door and wedged it shut. From outside, pounding, then splintering wood. Then Greg came jogging over, confused. He'd been in the bathroom. He heard there was someone at the door, saw nothing, and went to investigate anyway. Jay screamed at him to stop, but he didn't respond to a single word she said. She forced herself to move. She crawled toward the doorway. Someone appeared. She ran. She made it to the car and floored it without looking back, not even at her friends calling after her. She hit the road. A truck cut across the intersection ahead of her. She swerved. The car skidded off the road and plowed into a cornfield. The impact knocked her out. She woke up in a hospital bed. She was alive. But the feeling of being watched, of death tracking her, hadn't gone anywhere. Survival instinct, raw and ugly, did its work. She thought of what Hugh had said, the only way out. As if he sensed it, Greg, lying in the bed beside her, opened his eyes. There was no fear in them, only wanting. That night, in the narrow hospital bed, the curse was passed again. Jay felt lighter. The constant pressure of being watched dissolved. Greg, on the other hand, didn't take any of it seriously. He shrugged it off as nonsense. A few nights later, Jay was standing at her window, unable to sleep, when she saw something that froze her blood. Under a dim streetlight, a figure with Greg's face moved stiffly toward Greg's house, eyes empty, face expressionless, moving with an eerie, unhurried naturalness. It picked up a rock, smashed the window, climbed inside. Jay called Greg's phone. No answer. She ran. She crashed through his front door, but she was too late. In the hallway, a figure with the shape of Greg's mother was slamming against the bedroom door, half-dressed, relentless. Greg was dead. She had watched it happen, and the curse, like a boomerang, had landed back on her. She fled into the night, with no destination and no plan. She woke the next morning at the edge of an unfamiliar lake. A speedboat idled nearby, 3 young men on board. Jay stared at the boat. Something behind her eyes went flat. The thought circled her mind like a blade, the one that Hugh had planted there, the one she had been trying not to think. She began to undress. She waded into the cold water, moving toward the boat, one step at a time. The film doesn't show what happens next, but you already know. When someone is pushed far enough, dragging a stranger down with you stops feeling monstrous. It starts feeling like the only option left. Back home, Paul was still there, still wearing that expression of his, the one that said I would do anything for you, equal parts foolish and sincere. This time, Jay shook her head, not out of resistance. She shook her head because she understood now. It didn't matter who she passed it to. She would never truly be safe. Paul watched her face, that look of someone who has made their peace, and something reckless occurred to him. The thing had a body. Bullets could stop it. That meant it could be killed. It was a guess with no guarantee, but it was the only thread they had left. They chose an abandoned indoor swimming pool as their arena. They lined the edge of the pool with every electrical appliance they could find. Jay would stand in the center as bait. When the figure entered the water, they would electrocute it. Simple, stupid, borderline absurd, but it was the only defiance they had left at the far end of despair. Jay stepped into the cold pool and waited. The silence was terrible. Water lapped softly at the tiles. The others lay scattered around the edges, scanning the dark, tense, and sightless. Then Jay's expression changed. The figure had appeared again, and it had taken a new form. Her father, the man from the photographs, forever young, long dead. It was coming at her wearing the face of the person she loved most. The plan collapsed immediately. Instead of stepping into the pool, it began hurling appliances into the water. Chaos erupted. The electricity didn't work as intended. Jay thrashed and dodged, screaming. On the deck, her friends, unable to see the target, ran in all directions. Paul raised the gun and fired blind, following Jay's directions. In the chaos, a shot hit Yara. He kept firing. One shot found something, a burst of blood on the wall. Kelly grabbed a sheet and flung it toward where Jay pointed. The figure staggered and fell into the water. Jay lunged for the edge, but she was too slow. Something seized her and dragged her under. She fought with everything she had. From above, Paul fired again and again into the water below her. One shot struck something in the head. The grip released. The figure sank. Jay was hauled to the surface, gasping. She and the others held their breath and watched the pool. The water stilled. Jay crawled to the edge and looked down. A dark red bloom rose from the bottom, spreading slowly, diffusing into the water. No body surfaced. Nothing came up at all. In the end, Jay and Paul found their way to each other, not as an escape, not as a transfer, but as a quiet acknowledgement: if it's still out there, we face it together. In the final shot, they walk hand in hand down a suburban street. But in the soft blur of the background, a figure moves with a stiff and deliberate gait, one step at a time, following just behind them. It's still there. It never left.